The next movie we will be discussing is Luca Guadagnino's After the Hunt. Des, was After the Hunt good, bad, or mid?
Bad.
Yeah.
Bad film.
Diabolical. Let's get straight into it. After the Hunt follows a black female student at Yale called Maggie. She's also a queer woman. And we see her interacting with her professor, Alma. And Alma is a white woman. She's a professor at Yale. And she also has a colleague called Hank, who is a white man. We introduce them at a very pretentious party where they are discussing various quote-unquote woke topics. And the movie is very much indulging in that to start with, right? On this night, Alma sees Maggie and Hank leave the party, getting into the lift together, looking very friendly, and she goes to bed. And then shortly after that, we see Maggie in a very shaken state, approaching Alma and saying that she has been assaulted by Hank. Alma has a really cold response to that, and from there on, we see Maggie kind of contemplating who she should believe. It's worth noting that Alma has an inappropriate relationship with Hank. She's also a married woman, by the way. She's married to a man who she basically can't stand, and the movie makes it clear that she doesn't really care for him. Hank is a very attractive young man in the movie. We then see Alma navigating how to approach this with the deanery. And long story short, Maggie ultimately goes to the school and she lets them know that she's been assaulted. She lets them know how Alma responded to her. And Hank is ultimately fired, and we see him completely crashing out. He's also quite vicious towards Maggie at some points. And long story short, there's a big confrontation between Maggie and Alma towards the end, where Alma basically says to Maggie that, look, you're trying to destroy my life. You're just obsessed with me. You're dressing like me. You are trying to do everything like me. You just want to be me. You're in a relationship with a non-binary person who you don't care about. You're a mediocre person. It's also worth noting that the movie makes it very clear to us that Maggie apparently comes from a very wealthy black family, and this is a major point of contention in the movie. And then we have this very ridiculous final scene where essentially that whole dialogue where Alma says, oh, you're trying to be like me, it's revealed that almost everything she says is true. So we now see Maggie, and she's dressing more in her own style. She's dumped her non-binary partner. The only thing that doesn't get clarified is whether or not she was lying about Hank actually sexually assaulting her or not. And the movie leaves you to ponder on whether that scene is enough evidence for you to believe that Maggie was telling the truth or not.
I hate that final scene deeply, deeply. But let's get into it. Can I give some thoughts about this narrative that you've so kindly laid out for us? And I thank you for that, and I apologize to you for that you had to do that, because even just hearing you say it back was just giving me war flashbacks of the nonsense I was enduring inside that theater. I just want to talk briefly on literally that plot you just outlined here. And I want to highlight the fact that you basically just described the plot of Miller's Girl, which is a film that everybody understood was nonsensical tripe that was dead upon arrival. So why Luca Guadagnino saw the response to that film and decided to basically remake it, I don't understand. In terms of the story you've just laid out, I even think what you just described sounds more interesting and more narratively sensible than the film I watched.
I tried, girl.
I was like lolling in and out of consciousness while I was watching this film because I was just like in a daze, and not an artistically captivated daze, but in a daze of why am I here? And the more and more they revealed about these characters and their choices and how they were engaged with each other, the more irritated I was getting. Once again, I don't need people to actually be likable. In fact, my favorite character, my favorite performance in this film is a very deeply unlikable person. But I need them to make sense to me in an interesting way. Here, it just feels like very bizarre, like boomer understanding of how the world works. Now, I have seen a positive critique that actually flips that on its head, but we'll get into that.
Okay.
But yeah, narrative-wise, a mess.
A disaster.
That ending was one of the worst endings
I hated it. I was so pissed off.
I was willing to give this movie some storytelling credit as we got to like 80 to 90% of the movie. I was like, I can still accept some crumbs about how you've
Mm.
actually rolled out the story if you just stop it right here. But
Mm-hmm.
you see, when they added in that ending scene when she
Mm-hmm.
Julia Roberts' character Alma and Maggie, Ayodebri's character, they meet up in the future. I was like, okay, if they're going to do a flash forward scene, let me see what interesting thing they're going to do here. But what
Mm-hmm.
they actually sat down there to talk
It
about,
was
I was
disgusting.
like, oh, okay, no, this is even worse than I thought.
Right, so let's get straight into it. Let's talk about some of the themes or alleged potential themes for this movie. Right, so this movie is allegedly about cancel culture. And of course, the main kind of trigger for that in this movie is the potential sexual assault of Maggie. What did you think about the handling of sexual assault in this movie?
A mess, but I don't expect any much less from Luca Guadagnino, to be honest. Like, Call Me by Your Name is one of my favorite films of all time, and that's why I continue to give this man so many chances because I think he created a masterpiece in that film. But I am not in any way going to pretend that that film is handling power dynamics in sexual relationships in an appropriate manner. So I don't expect that much from Luca, but he managed to still not meet that. Even Queer, I had some
Mm,
concerns about how
got
he
the
was
same.
handling age gaps and
Mm-hmm.
like consents and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So this is a recurring thing with some of his films. There's also like implied sexual assault in Bones and All. So again, continuous thing for Luca Guadagnino. This is probably the most despicably is handled. Not because I think doing this like ambiguous
Mm-hmm.
sexual assault storyline is that like shocking and
Yep.
outrageous to me, but just because it's not artful. There's
Yeah.
nothing
There's no
about
artistry.
keeping that story ambiguous that to me actually is worthwhile
Yeah.
artistically.
Yeah. No. I can already preempt people talking about, oh, where's the media literacy? Here's the thing. I'm actually okay with having that conversation about the nuances around how we handle sexual assault allegations and the fact that some allegations won't be true, right? It's the truth. There will be a small fraction that are not true. However, my thing is this: we live in a world where only 1% of sexual assault cases are being prosecuted in the United States, only 1% are being prosecuted in the UK. What that means for me is if you want to have this conversation about the nuances of false allegations, there needs to be a proper endpoint here. There needs to be something actually saying. I've heard Luca Guadagnino talk about what he wanted to achieve with this movie, and he very explicitly says that he remembers going to cinema as a child and watching provocative movies, and he hopes for this movie to generate conversation. I'm so glad that it failed. We're not even having the conversations he wants us to have. He wants us to be having some dialogue right now about how do we handle people who are lying in sexual assault, and we're here to trash the movie as a bunch of other people are as well. I'm very happy about that. Now, here's the thing, right? Guadagnino thinks he's slick. He's trying to do this movie about cancel culture and using sexual assault as the theme to do that. And I remember when I was watching this movie, I was like, this movie has such a very distinct style and font. I was like, where's this coming from? I've seen this before. And I couldn't put my finger on it until when I was doing some research and I realized the font that he uses in the beginning is a Woody Allen font.
Oh God.
And a lot of the style of the movie is pulling from Woody Allen. And Luca Guadagnino is saying explicitly that yes, I made that choice because it's relevant to the movie. So now you've lost me because you're handling a very serious topic of further perpetuating this narrative about people lying about sexual assault and pretending that it's this wide scale issue, which it isn't, literally statistically. And then you're conceding that you're only doing it because you want people to just talk about your movie. Again, you don't have any interest in any solutions here. And number three, you're going to be referencing directly somebody who has countless terrible allegations against him when it comes to sexual assault and abuse. I was furious.
Now, I do think that Luca's work is intentionally often somewhat kaleidoscopic. So trying to interpret it like with a very straightforward conclusion is not necessarily always the best way to approach it. So let me flip the lens for this film, right? I have seen analysis that says that it might initially seem like this movie is an old man boomer complaining about Gen Z being too sensitive and
Mm,
how they're all crying wolf about sexual assault, even when they aren't. But that actually the movie is doing almost the exact opposite. That what
mm,
it is in fact doing is that it's trying to demonstrate to you how the boomer generation and certain older generations are so sunken in their own unresolved and unprocessed trauma and harm that was done to them, that they refuse to handle properly, and how they try and transfer that onto Gen Z or very young millennials. And when Gen Z refuse to inherit that trauma from them, they push back against it, that they almost try to punish them for that. And that the film is actually demonstrating that to you, that like is insisting on refusing to let those characters take on these people's kind of like generational trauma, even if it means that they're kind of assholes and they're kind of quote unquote annoying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the person that said, I could see how if you want to be very generous in how you're viewing this film, you could see it that way. And I think Luca, to some degree, as a director, he's intelligent enough to allow just enough leeway for you to interpret it that way. However, I think a pattern of behavior has been established with this filmmaker that means I personally cannot give him that much leeway in how I will interpret this kind of film. I'm not convinced. And I think
I'm not.
any criticisms is giving for both sides are too heavily weighed towards one side
Exactly.
for me to think that actually no, he's trying to subvert that. I'm not convinced. And that final scene with Maggie is
Exactly.
just the
It's
death
the
knell for me.
confirmation.
It's like I don't know how, I'm not sure how I could contort myself into watching that final scene and believing it, because to me with that final scene there's so many different things that she says in that final scene that are so revelatory of what this film is actually trying to say.
Yep.
Hey, the fact that she's left her non-binary partner and is now with an older woman, and they make
Woman.
a
Yeah.
point, they make a point of highlighting the fact that she's with an older woman, and her saying, oh, I don't know if I wanted to be with you or not, but basically just confirming for sure that she did
That
have
Julie was
some
right.
kind of like sexual imprinting infatuation with her. Like, Julia is not imagining it, that this girl does want her, blah, blah, blah. And she's being still kind of an asshole about all of this in the way she's talking to Alma, who is also not a good person. I don't know how this film can leave you on that note and you don't think that ultimately it's trying to critique Maggie's generation more than anybody else.
This entire movie, they present Maggie as this first of all, they say she's incompetent repeatedly, which again, as a black woman who's gone to a university like Yale, that was grating on me. Not because it's impossible to be incompetent as a black person at a university like that, but because it's so incredibly unlikely. So again, we've got this theme of Luca Guadagnino referring to these very unlikely scenarios, combining all of them into a movie that's trying to make a comment about cancel culture. It just doesn't work. She's presented as incompetent. She's presented as a spoiled rich kid. She's presented as someone who doesn't really care about her non-binary partner and just uses her non-binary partner as like a left-wing social status thing. It's very on-the-nose commentary about Gen Z that we've all heard so many times before. Come on now.
Speaking of on the nose, that scene where the mob basically surrounds Alma and they're all picketing in her face to the point she literally collapses on the floor. I could not believe that scene. I was like, you can't be serious with this. Like, I was like, is this going to be like a dream sequence? And I was like, and then I realized, no, this is supposed to be a scene we're taking seriously. And I was just like, what in the most exaggerated, cartoonish idea of what older people think Gen Z are is going on here? If anything, half of Gen Z right now have all turned into a bunch of like Trump supporting, Nigel Farage supporting white supremacists. I think this blanket idea that Gen Z is just a bunch of non-binary queer black women that are taking advantages of positions in Yale and are just too sensitive is such a simplistic and lazy understanding of what is actually going on with that generation.
Exactly.
Do you know that Gen Z men right now are more likely to harbor very, very hateful views of women and than men in the generation above them? Like, it's just like, bro, do you even actually understand what's going on here? Now, they did try and maybe address that with the little thing. I don't know if you noticed it. When we flash forward to the future, to 5 years in the future in 2025, and you can hear Alma watching the news or listening to a podcast talking about how Meta is rounding down his DEI and that. The message I got from that is that they're trying to basically say that you see all this over correctness that you were doing in 2019, 2020, it has led to this extreme backlash in 2025, so
Yeah.
it's all your fault.
Yeah.
That's the takeaway I got from that. And I was like, that's such a, how do I say this gently, white way of understanding what always happens when social progress happens.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter
It's
what you
ignorant.
do. It doesn't matter how nice or sweet or well packaged you try and package social progress, especially when it involves Black people. Historically in America, there will always be a backlash. That has always happened. Jim Crow, Reconstruction, civil rights. This is a thing. The way the arc of social progress is always
It's never
one step
linear.
forward, two step backwards, two steps forward, one step backward. If you
Yeah.
understand anything about how America works and how the world works, you know this is not unusual. That's why in 2020, when all the companies were doing all of this, including mine, including yours, you and I were just watching them with amusement because we knew they didn't actually give a
Mm-hmm.
damn, and that
Mm-hmm.
when the time come, they would show their true colors. Like, so we didn't get, whipped up into, oh my God, they really care. They're really thinking about Black Lives Matter. We know what it is. We know with these
Mm-hmm.
kind of things, they will always punish you for the social progress that they themselves joined in on as a trend. And then it repeats itself like as a cycle. So that connection that the film tries to make between the two, I think is such a like uninformed and simplistic and like unintellectual closing message that
And
was so unimpressed.
there's a feature in the score that really speaks to this as well. And again, it just shows how muddled the themes are in this movie. So a lot of people have been complaining about the ticking sound that we hear, and it is quite obnoxious, and it feels like it's coming up at random points. The ticking sound that we hear in the movie, I knew the first time I heard it that it was going to be a countdown to when Alma's is cancelled, quote unquote, by her university. And I was right. We no longer hear the ticking sound after Alma is confronted for committing medical fraud. Now, here's the problem. The ticking is obviously supposed to be a reference to Me Too, Time Is Up, right? Again, it's a cancel culture movie. But the reason why Alma is confronted by the
Oh,
university has nothing to do with sexual assault.
I didn't actually think about Time's Up specifically, like that actual literal wording, but that's okay.
It
That
has
makes
nothing
sense.
to do with
Go on.
sexual assault. The way how I interpreted it is that Luca Guadagnino is making a point through Julia Roberts' character's eyes that it almost feels like he's saying that she should have been on Hank's side at least a bit more, because if you sit by and watch other people get cancelled, then understand you're going to get cancelled one day as well, especially as a white woman. I guess that's what they're trying to tell us. But again, the problem is Alma is cancelled for a good reason. She's committing medical fraud using university personnel. That's something you should be accountable for. So even if you want to do this song and dance and flirtation around, oh, did Hank do it? Didn't he do it? Maybe he was just being flirtatious. If you want to do that with Hank, that's fine. But in Julia Roberts' character's case, that doesn't apply. So it's like this theme is too muddled for me to take it seriously.
Do you think maybe to some degree Luca just wants to trigger this kind of conversation? He wants to encourage the outrage, like that's kind of almost the
Yes,
joke of
that's
it
what I said from
all.
the jump. He said it in an interview, and I think that's actually annoyed me as well. The fact he's come out and said it explicitly, it's like you have no shame. You have no shame. And I'm so glad he's failed in his attempt to do that, because nobody's having that conversation. In order for us to have that conversation, you need to commit to something a bit more. But because he's doing this song and dance and trying not to commit to anything, what that means is we don't even have the foundation to start having that conversation that he wants us to have about cancel culture.
Again, like when I start hearing terminology like this, I almost start yawning because I'm like, very few people have had any interesting stuff to say to me about the concept of quote unquote cancellation in 2025. I'm like, you really have to do a lot to convince me this is a conversation worth having right now because it's often just such tired talking points.
Mm.
I will say that I think the film is very critical of certain characters like Clovis J's character, Kim, the
Mm-hmm.
therapist,
Mm-hmm.
in that she just keeps on rambling and ranting about how this new generation, but like she's kind of an asshole and she clearly doesn't respect boundaries. She doesn't respect her patient's privacy as a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and she's not a great friend to Alma. Now Alma was
Mm-hmm.
kind of an asshole to her, but she did quite a she kind of made a decision that would destroy her life very
Mm-hmm.
intentionally without even giving her a heads up. So I will say the film is kind of cynical of lots of people. Andrew Garfield's Hank character, everything about that character makes no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way he keeps on talking about you young people, and I'm like, Andrew Garfield, you look like you're
You're young.
35 years
Yeah.
old. Ayo Edebiri is 30. You guys don't look that far apart in age for me. So this message you're trying to make doesn't make sense. If I think what would have made sense to cast in that character is like a good looking silver fox kind of actor, like a good looking actor that is clearly in his late 30s or early 40s.
Mm.
Andrew Garfield can almost pass as some of these like PhD students. So all this, oh, you young generation or this, I'm like, I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that your character would be conducting yourself like this. Also, like just the Andrew Garfield performance to me wasn't convincing in general.
Really? I will
No.
say, as much as I don't like the character, I thought it made sense because of how audacious he is when he confronts Maggie in person in front of her colleagues. And I think he even like threatens her or raises his voice. He does something to show that he is a genuine threat. I also note that even though I didn't care for the scene because I just knew that Guadagnino was playing games, when we see Alma initiating sexual contact with him, basically, she asks him to stop, and he doesn't for a while, right? And the way how the camera just zooms in on her face, I knew exactly what Guadagnino was up to. It wasn't working for me. One of the theme I want to talk about is queerness and really speak to why this movie properly doesn't work. Because I actually don't have too many issues with the script itself. I think the execution is the problem. And a
I
big
agree.
reason why it didn't work for me, unfortunately, is because of Ayo Adebri's performance. And the reason why is because I was in no way convinced that Ayo Adebri's Maggie had any sort of attraction to Julia Roberts' Alma. It didn't work for me. So when the movie drops it through dialogue, I was just like, what the hell's going on here? Like, Julia Roberts is delusional. And then, of course, we have that ending scene where it's exposed that actually she did feel that way. And I'm like, well, you did nothing to show me that. I really want to support her as an actress. I have to say, though, she was the worst of the lead three performances.
So I want to definitely agree with you that I actually think the script for this movie is pretty cool and interesting. And in the hands of a more locked in filmmaker, they would have done exactly what they need to. But I don't know. I don't think I've seen any movie handle the subject matter correctly yet. A lot of these
I have.
filmmakers are struggling with it.
I'll explain after.
Okay. I'm not sure any man can handle this subject matter properly in 2025. I mean, maybe
Yes.
they can, but I'm yet to see evidence of it.
Yeah.
I do think the script could have. I can see how you could read the script and think there's something clever you have here.
Mm-hmm.
With the Ayo Edebiri performance, that's my Niger sister. Okay. I think that her character is presented not either Machiavellian enough,
Mm.
nor in the clouds, dreamy, progressive fantasy elfishness enough.
Mm.
So she just sits in this slightly clunky in between place that doesn't work.
Yeah.
In the end, she turns quite Machiavellian,
Exactly.
like the
Yeah.
very end, but it doesn't work as a transition.
And this points to the fact that it could be a Guadagnino problem as well. And what I find interesting is Guadagnino has done a lot of films now to addressing queerness in men and quite successfully, as you said, Call Me by My Name is very popular. He also had Queer more recently, which was not as popular, but I thought it was still a well-made movie, and I definitely understood the queer dynamics in it.
And it
But
was beautiful.
and it was beautiful. That's another point. But I feel like he really doesn't understand queer dynamics when it comes to women, and it really came out in this movie. On the point you made about beauty, another thing I didn't like about this movie is, Guadagnino films are usually, if nothing else, very beautiful. And this movie lacked a certain amount of flair for me. So it's like, you're not giving us what you usually promise us, right? Which is a degree of beautiful shots and good cinematography, but you're also not giving us the dialogue we need. So what are you giving us?
What are you giving us? My exact review when I first watched this film on Letterboxd said, cinematography wise, this film is not as beautiful as Guadagnino films, but it is stylish.
It is
So
stylish, yeah.
I had a similar critique of Challengers. Challengers' entire costume design was done by Jonathan Anderson for Loewe, and you can tell because many times it felt like I was watching a fashion film. Similarly, here for After the Hunt, I think the way Julia Roberts' character is styled, the way the flats they're in are designed, look very cool. Looks like you've set stuff up for a casual interiors decor magazine photo shoot, but the film itself is
Yeah.
not shot very
Yeah.
beautifully. Now, once again, maybe I could give it the benefit of the doubt that that's almost intentional, that they're supposed to be demonstrating almost like this brutalist, almost this rigid, grey institutionalism of being on a university campus. And that's why it's not as beautiful as something like Call
Mm,
Me By Your Name, where you're out in Italy,
yeah, I
or
was thinking
Queer,
about
where
that.
you're traveling through South America. But I don't know, I'm just not convinced because one of my favorite short films of the year is My Father's Shadow, which managed to turn Lagos, a place that I've never seen captured to be a beautiful place properly on camera, into one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So
Mm,
I think you can make anything beautiful if you
if you
shoot it
want to, yeah.
properly, and while still acknowledging that that thing has harshness, or it has austerity, or it has grayness. I don't think those two things need to be. I don't think those two things are mutually exclusive.
I also want to speak on the score. I wasn't too mad at the score. It does have some quite random moments, and I've already explained what I think about the ticking sound. It does add to the specific style of this movie, though. It did add some drama to the experience of it all,
Some
but at
flair.
times, yeah, some flair. But it was also a bit obnoxious at times as well. Again, I'm clutching at straws here to try and say something positive about this movie.
I will say the sound didn't bother me at all. The ticking didn't bother me. The extraness of it didn't bother me. Actually, I was actually very fine with all of that. I don't hate this movie. It just makes me roll my eyes a bit.
I don't like the movie because I don't think you should touch sensitive topics and depict them if you don't actually have the range to properly discuss them or even present the nuance in them. I alluded to the fact that earlier I have seen a movie that's able to tackle this subject with the care and the grace that it deserves, even when it's making nuance points. And I've referred to this movie multiple times this year, and that's Sorry Baby. In Sorry Baby, directed and written by Eva Victor, we cover sexual assault on a university campus as well. And these two movies are just so far apart when it comes to the level of skill in managing a subject like this and the power dynamics that come with sexual assault happening on student campuses with a professor involved. So it doesn't help Guadagnino that I saw this movie this year and not that long ago. So Des, how would you rate After the Hunt out of 10?
It's a 5 out of 10 for me. I didn't like the film, but I wasn't angry that I sat in the cinema and watched it because I do think Julia Roberts is just a movie star. And I think her performance was actually very good from
It
beginning to
was.
end. From
It was,
beginning
yeah.
to end. I fully believed her character. Also, because I'm used to seeing Julia Roberts play somewhat endearing and earnest people, seeing her play this person that's kind of like nasty, but in
Mm-hmm.
a coldly controlled way
Mm-hmm.
was different for her. And I thought she nailed it. I actually thought her performance is very, very strong. So for that reason, I can't give this film too low a score because the lead performance is that strong. Also, I
Mm-hmm.
think it is very, very stylish. And I also think the film is thought provoking in that I can have a strong conversation about it. And I don't give films very, very low scores except if I truly feel like they wasted my time.
I think this movie is a 2 out of 10. I was annoyed that I wasted my time watching the movie. Guadagnino has said explicitly that he just wants to provoke conversation. First of all, he's failed in that process because I haven't seen anyone really having the, the dialogue that he really wants us to have. I agree that the costuming for Julia Roberts and Iowa Deborah in the beginning is stylish. I agree with that. Apart from that, the cinematography is not that interesting. I wasn't that gagged by the other performances. Nothing else really gagged me.
The first time we see Maggie, where she's wearing the suit at the little dinner party, I thought Ayo looked fabulous in that scene.
The wig
I
they put
loved
her on is
it.
crazy. Like the wig they put on her was wild.
I'm not going to speak on the wig, but I love the styling of the suits when we first see her. We haven't really talked about Michael Stolberg as Frederick, the husband,
Oh
his
yeah,
performance, and the reveal of Alma's her dad's friend that sexually assaulted her, and how he tries to explain to her that it wasn't your fault. How is that a woman that's teaching philosophy in a higher institution that her husband needs to be spelling it out to her 1 plus 1 equals to the concept of a child cannot consent? to
Actually, that
sex
doesn't
with an adult
surprise me. That
man.
doesn't surprise me.
I'm not saying
Philosophers
there
are
aren't
also.
older people that feel that way, but like I feel like that kind of character that has been tenured in such a role for so long, she would have been exposed to these arguments or explanations before. Like that shouldn't be the first time someone is telling her that.
I don't think that was the first time she heard it. I also don't think it's the first time it's run through her head. I think she's thought about all of those things, and you even see where what the husband says basically goes in one ear and out the other ear. She's heard it all before. She is convinced that she was in a romantic partnership with this older man, and she had autonomy as a 15-year-old. And I do think that philosophers, because of the nature of their work, they don't work with strict definitions in the way how the rest of us do. For example, if you have this conversation with a philosopher, they'll automatically say, well, how do you define a child? And, is a child the same thing in this country and that country and da da da? So yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all.
I guess they try and introduce that with the scenes of her with her students when she's constantly
Yeah,
pushing back
pushing
about
back,
them
yeah.
trying to personify certain roles of society to like anthropomorphically. And again, Julia Roberts, she delivered all of
She
those
did a
lines.
great
She
job.
really, really did a great job.
By far, Julia Roberts is my favorite thing about this movie. It's still not enough to redeem it for me, though. What I found interesting about the husband, and I have to highlight this scene very quickly because my blood was raging. There's a scene in this movie that reminded me a lot of Anatomy of a Fall. And it's the scene where Alma and Maggie are having a conversation in Alma's house in the kitchen. And the husband is there until basically Alma says, listen, you're dismissed. I want to talk to this young woman. And he completely throws a tantrum. And I was immediately transported back to Anatomy of a Fall in that amazing opening sequence. And my
Mm.
blood was boiling. I was like, I did enjoy the husband because it shows you that these men who present themselves as, oh, I'm just so in love with her, I'm just obsessed with her, I just want to do anything to be with her. The second you do something other than what they want you to do, they throw their toys out of the pram and you see the real them. So I'm actually not convinced that the husband loves her at all. But yeah, I did want to call out that scene. I thought it was quite good, but probably taken from Anatomy before.
The husband, I have to say, Michael Stolberg playing Frederick, all I kept on thinking about as I was watching his performance is this not the exact same character you played in Call Me By Your Name as Timothy Chalamet's father? Like from the way he dresses
Hmm.
to his characterization that he has flares to his kind of like almost endless gentleness
Hmm.
with the people he
Alleged.
loves. I was like, this is a bit. I've literally seen Luca direct you into almost this exact character before. So that was it wasn't a bad performance. It was just like a
Hmm.
familiar performance.
He was also very queer coded for me.
Just like in Call Me By, do you remember what his character reveals to his son at the end of Call Me By Your Name?
Yeah, vaguely, yeah.
Yeah, that he says, oh
Mm.
yeah, that when I was young, I did have
Yeah,
these thoughts, but I never got to live them out, blah, blah, blah. So again, I was just like, oh,
interesting.
again,
Does After the Hunt pass the Bechdel test?
yes, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Our two lead characters are both women, and they are entangled with each other in what should be an intriguing push and pull, but instead it's just like a formulaic, unserious
Yeah.
push and pull.
Yeah.
It should be like a real tussle of minds and psychologies and horniness
Yeah.
and lust and intimidation and intrigue. And instead it's just like silly talking points being thrown back and forth.
And again, this is what Hedda gave us, which is another reason why I liked it. Hedda gave us exactly that. We see women engaging in power play and having an undercurrent of sexual attraction. I didn't get any of that here. Unfortunately, I do put that at the feet of Ayoa Debris' performance.
Do you think Luca, there's a world where Luca would have directed that? Because I'm yet to see Luca do that once in any of his films between two women.
Yeah, so I did criticize him for that I suspect he's part of the problem here as well.
Yeah, like I've seen Luca direct a woman into a good performance before, but I don't know if I've seen him consistently direct two women in a storyline with each
Hmm.
other, if that makes sense.
I think the way how the movie presents Alma, it's almost as if she's very narcissistic and she's just very desperate for sexual attention from anyone. So I don't even get any vibe that she's a bisexual woman or anything like that. I think she just likes having people around her that are infatuated with her. And I think the movie even explicitly says this at times as well. So that's the reason why I think it's actually on Ayo Edebiri to be the one driving that sexual energy. And she didn't do any of it. Whether it's her fault or whether it's Luca Guadagnino's fault, it just wasn't there.
Which actress do you think would have nailed that better?
We have issues about her performances, but that's a Tessa Thompson thing.
Hmm. Okay.
That's her back. That is what she is good at doing.
Okay. Okay. Mm.
Who do you think?
I'm actually weirdly thinking about another woman that Luca has directed before, Taylor Russell. Even though I wasn't obsessed with
Mm,
her performance in Bones and All, I do think she has a natural, like, almost creepy sensuality to how she performs that could
I
have
can see
actually
that.
been intriguing.
Yeah.
Um, I also think about, I guess this character needs to be a black woman. Though. I was about to mention some names, but those were white girls. I don't think it works if it's a white girl.
Hmm.
But for the Bechdel test, it does pass. I can't completely write this film off. I actually never questioned that Julia Roberts believed that he assaulted Maggie. I felt like the performance Julia Roberts is giving as Alma is one of a person that actually believes he did sexually assault her. Now she thinks Maggie is a scammer, but she also believes that he did it because even in the conversation she had with Hank, she wasn't really giving him an inch when he would try and cloak himself in innocence, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but then let's not forget that she shoves her tongue down his throat again
Oh no, but she's a
shortly after that.
mess. She's a
Yeah.
mess. She's a mess.
I believe she believed Maggie for the majority of the movie. I do think there were short periods where she was just like, I'm not sure though. She's ultimately a very self-serving person. She doesn't really care about anyone else apart from herself. And I did enjoy seeing that. And I enjoyed seeing Julia Roberts perform that role. A final comment from me. What I found interesting on the gender aspect is that for about 80% of this movie, we don't really see any traditionally femme presenting women. All of the women are dressed in this very specific suited style, which again I did enjoy actually. And I was wondering, like, for that first 80%, I don't think I saw a single woman in a dress, a single woman in a skirt. And I'm not saying that as a derogatory thing. I just thought it was an interesting observation. And I don't really know how that would have added to the storyline, but it was something that interesting to note.
Again, one thing I continue to give this movie, it has a very clear style signature in terms of
Mm,
how it aesthetically presents keep the physical characters and the spaces they live in a way that feels in a world of its own. And that's one thing I always give Luca all of his movies, even with all my issues with queer. I felt like every little stitch and every little frame and every little room that film had, if you just showed me a picture of it in isolation, I'll be like, oh, that's from that movie.
yeah,
Similarly, if you showed me a character dressed up like these women from this film, I'll be like, those look like the women from After the Hunt. Like, he tends
yeah,
to
that's fair.
really nail having a clear visual signature for each of his films, and it's not repetitive either,
Mm,
which is actually quite impressive for someone as prolific as him. I mean, he's
mm.
released 3 movies in the last 18, 20 months. Maybe he needs to reduce it a bit. Maybe that's part of the
Need
problem.
some fresh
Because none of the
ideas.
three of them did I love.
Now that I think about it, I do think it was deliberate to have basically no dresses for the majority of the movie. The reason why is because when we finally see Maggie turning up very femme presenting, wig done, hair done, dress, boots, leather jacket, it really drives home what Alma was saying before, that Maggie was just pretending to be someone she wasn't in order to get close to her. And it did work for me, that reveal, but again, apart from that, that final scene was ridiculous.
The final confrontation, not the very final scene, but the confrontation on campus between Maggie and Alma, where Alma calls her out that you're trying to look like me, and Maggie is literally wearing the same white trousers and she's tucked in her top in the same way and
Mm.
the belt. I found that visually funny. I was
Mm.
amused by that because I had already started wondering that why is Ayo Debiri walking around looking like this? And so that was funny.
This reminds me of one other key aspect about the cinematography and the filmmaking here, which is the focus on hands. So in the beginning, I thought it was just to focus in on who's married versus who's not married. But I realized towards the end of the movie, I think there's another axis to it. So I saw someone point out that in the scene, I think it's in that scene actually, just before they have the massive confrontation, the camera zooms in on both of their hands and we see that Maggie has a black nail varnish just like Alma. So I don't know. I guess they were making a point that, I don't know, was she ramping up her infatuation with Alma? I don't know. I found it interesting.
Hmm. I think, like all Guadagnino films, this is a film that, like, whilst I'm not rushing to rewatch it, when it's out on VOD and streaming, I might go back to it to kind of like zoom in on certain choices again to try and like see if I think there's certain kind of intentionality to some elements of the shots. I don't think if the visual content of the film feels mundane or meaningless. Just like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think the script is necessarily meaningless either, but there's something about when you put all the elements together, including the directing, including some of the performance choices, and especially that ending, that it all just kind of like
Yeah.
unfortunately reveals itself to be flimsy.
Yeah, right. That's the perfect word for this movie. Flimsy.